welcome to Provocateurs.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Really lovely studio.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Thank you for joining me. So tell me and the guests a little bit more about what you do and what you have done, because your career has been like super varied.
Been quite a journey. Long story short, grew up in Germany, but not by my choice, by my parents' choice. My dad and my mum in a creative space. Went over there as missionary, smuggling Bibles, medicine, and food into the DDR for 8 years, as you do. Wall fell, they stayed. I grew up there, which was great. And then I left when I was 17, lived in 6 countries by myself, not with my family, and ended up in England. So that's a long story short. Done a various range of interesting jobs, from glamorous to absolutely not glamorous, to, beekeeping, which was one of my favorite. Always put on my CV when I get interviewed. Last interview I had was about 15 years ago, but whenever that happens. And I've got into fashion. I fell into fashion more than anything. Was a commercial fitness model for quite a few years in America and Canada, and took that career around the world for about 2.5 years full time. And then decided to actually do something with my brain and moved to the UK to study. So I studied international business with languages, Chinese and French, and started up a fashion brand, co-founded it with my business partner, and we ran that right until 2017, where we decided to split ways, and I set up a separate brand new company, new team, new everything, needed a new start, and set up a concierge company. So now, actually, because of that, we run a couple of different projects, but I'd say entrepreneur in many ways. We also have a startup consultancy that helps startups grow, which is fantastic. And I'm basically all about growing businesses, growing and leaders, and it's been all a big part of what I love and enjoy doing. So I could go into more detail, and you can check my LinkedIn if you want. Cheeky plug for LinkedIn. But yeah, no, it's been a journey. I've done a lot of different jobs, traveled a lot, met a lot of different people, and I guess I just identified the need things that people need, and created a business model around that. And now I travel a lot. Just got back half an hour ago, really, and really enjoy what I do. Yeah, got a great team, and projects are very varied. So
love it. And you work with so many different types of people.
Yes,
as do I.
do.
I think my whole business is people.
Yes,
and we have a quote in our office. You're allowed to swear on here. We say people are shit.
Yeah.
Every day we're like surprised by the weird and wonderful nature of people. What's been one of the weirdest and most unusual experiences you've had from people in your career?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of the thing I always struggle with is, I'll say one thing: if you deliver a bad job and mess up and don't do well, and then get the person you're working with, client, whatever you want to call it, respond in a bad way, that's one thing. But if you do an absolutely smashing job and do everything that you need, and they respond in a horrific way, that's just one thing that still baffles me to this day. And I've had this many times. You deliver and excel above and beyond, everyone agrees, the client including, and then they don't pay, or they take you to court, or whatever, like something crazy where you think to yourself, which world do they live in? And I think that's what happens when you work with a range of different people, different careers and different backgrounds. Specific things, issues I've had, there's been a bunch of, basically a lot of people owe me money. That's the one fun thing. One fun thing of being an entrepreneur.
Get into business, people owe you money.
Trust me, I tell you stories. It's definitely a lot of risk, setting up your own partnerships, your own clients. I mean, all about this. Working with a lot of different people. I mean, we've had people go crazy about assumptions, not understanding contracts, not understanding how work functions or what they need to do, and therefore flip out and, always have to explain, always have to, I think, put yourself in people's shoes, because, it's just it's basically constant problem solving. That's kind of what I end up doing all the time. You get really good at problem solving. And I think that's one thing I've always taken from my few skill sets I have is problem solving. And putting yourself in other people's shoes. I think that's the two things I'm actually good at. I'm not good at much more, but those two things I think
That's great. Empathy and fixing stuff.
Yeah, you give me a problem, I'll give you 2 solutions. That, people love complaining, as you know. People love just showing the problem and not thinking any further. And you're like, just think a little further. And that's kind of one of my passions, and things I think I've done fairly well.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So I where did we meet? We met at one of your events. Didn't
yeah. Was it a brunch?
Years ago. I think it was like one of your music events.
Maybe it was one of the music events.
Yeah, music live, music box. And I think we connected on many different levels. And one of them was on how we've been brought up with faith. So you were brought up in a Christian, you said you were brought up by Christian missionaries.
Yeah.
What was that like growing up in Germany?
Well, for me, I never really, it was, so I'm still very young, obviously. And I was just born after the war fell. So I wasn't really involved in the whole element of what they were doing, my parents. But my dad and my mom did some incredible things. I mean, they set up a secret printing factory. They smuggled Bibles and medicine and food. I mean, the DDR was a mess. And after the war, obviously Russians controlled, and my dad got put into prison, got beaten up. All sorts of crazy stories. So I had the sort of the testimonies from those stories. There's crazy, mad stories. I'm still like, you could listen to them all day. But a lot of that kind of was just shared in a very open manner, inspired more than anything, right? And I think it just also showed me what it means to be, an entrepreneur is someone who takes risk all the time. It's super risky. I've taken so much risk in my life. And I think one of the reasons I've taken risks was through the inspiration from my parents. It was never forced to me, which was beautiful. Anything, business, faith, none of that. But they all shared their thoughts, shared their experiences, and I said, Karlo, like, if you think that's something you would appreciate, then go for it, and if not, and I think my family, they're doers. They're very proactive. They don't talk too much. They like doing. My mom's a massive doer. She doesn't talk much at all. She just does. And then people are like, oh, that's really cool. So I always appreciate that. I try not to talk too much. Like we're talking right now. But generally, I think, talk is cheap if it's not followed by actions, and I think that's one thing I've always had close to my heart is actually implementing what I say, and keeping myself accountable to it. Obviously, you can't always be perfect, but I think it's a big part of trying to follow up with what you say, even if there's issues or delays or, struggles. But I think that's been one of the lessons I've learned from my family. Going through that. So and faith has always been a big part of my life. Without faith, I definitely, most certainly would be dead right now. And that's another story, but yeah. And we're talking about this offline before, but I've been looking at some of the recent news articles which show there's a massive resurgence in Christianity in Western culture. I think they were saying it was from 2018 to 2024, particularly with young adults and young men. Yeah.
What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? It's like they call it a quiet revival. I don't think it's very quiet. It's quite obvious. But, I've been to various festivals and events this year and speaking to various friends and partners in the space. And it's incredible what's happening. I think what I think has happened, I'm not saying I'm right, but I think that's very much based on what I can see around me, is there was a lot of, there was many, call it revival, many amazing movements in the 50 after the war, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I think what's happened over the years was that this element of revival being a relationship, being a faith you live out, not something you just read in a book, turned more and more into a book you just read and have to follow. And it took the element of reality away. I think that's what I see. And I think, and it took basically I think religion is dead, and it's something, you read and do. I say, people say, oh, Karlo, you're so religious. And I was like, I'm not religious at all, because religion is something you do because you feel you have to. Whereas faith is something you live out and because you believe it. It's two completely different things. So I don't do anything in my faith because I have to. No one forces me. No one's standing behind me, beating me up, including God. And it's purely out of the reality that I live in. And I think that's a big difference. I think what's happening is with these youth, they're sick of society. They've tried everything. We've all tried all sorts of things, and it's always just leaves you empty. I think that's one element. You can try as much as you want, no matter how famous you get, how much money. I know a lot of people from ultra wealthy to ultra poor and everything in between. And the one thing that I will say is they try everything, and it always leaves them needing more. And I've always get inspired by the words of Jesus. I've come to give you life and life in the full. And I think that's one thing that I've never been able to get anywhere else. Temporary life, yeah, sure. Temporary pleasure, sure. Temporary happiness, absolutely. But long term, No. And I think a lot of youth are realizing that they've tried everything because that's the kind of society we live in, you know, do whatever you want, say whatever you want, be whatever you want. As long as you're not hurting anyone, you know, that's cool. And I think they've all tried all that and they're like, it's empty and it's pretty dead. And I think they're like, there needs to be something more. And I think my crazy experiences, right, is that anyone who comes to faith in this society, and you can tell me if you know someone else, has never come to faith because they felt forced or because they had to do it, especially now, 2025. I mean, maybe 50, 60 years ago when the parents said go to church or whatever, you know, whatever. But I think this society is very much, the reason is because they experienced God in a Christian context, not in some whatever context, but actually like the reality. And I think that's one thing I would say to anyone is like, there's a difference between following something blindly and following something because you know the reality of something. And I've experienced the reality over and over and over and over again. And you can't lie about it, you know. And end of the day, I think it's the good news after all. Gospel's been good news, and it's good news. You know, there's good news. It changed my life for sure. I mean, I wasn't someone who was in prison for 10 years and was a drug addict for 15, you know. But many of my friends and people I know were. And you know, what else can change like that? Like, call it coincidence? Call it no. But you once you see too many coincidences, you start wondering, like, maybe there's more to that than just a coincidence. And I think that's what I see in this society is no one coming to faith. Young people, I know a lot of young people. I was just helping with youth in this previous festival I was at, and they all come to Jesus purely based on an experience with God, with a power, call it whatever you want, a higher being that fits the criteria of the Bible. And I think that's just speaks for itself. No one's forced them. And I'm like, wow. And they're on fire. They're not like, oh, you know, fake, or they're real. You know, they're on fire. They don't care what people think. And that's just what I'm seeing. And I'm standing back, I'm like, that's inspiring. That's real.
And so what do you mean by experience?
Yeah, I think experience means a change in your circumstances, change in your life, something that you know is real. And whatever that is, that can be a feeling, that can be something physical, that can be a change in circumstance. You know, I know so many crazy stories. I mean, stories of addiction, for example, where someone was addicted, one of my good friends was addicted to meth for 15 years, tried everything, therapy, you know, doctors, you know, all sorts of retreats, never worked. And then he literally went to church one day and encountered God, and literally within an instant he was freed from that addiction, never went back to meth. I explain that. I mean, and you can say, look, if it was happening somewhere randomly with some sort of random circumstance, maybe, but it was at church while he was praying for help, you know. So it's always very specific. And I think it's like, and if it's through miracles or things I see daily, I mean, I see so much of this stuff, and because I'm kind of open to it, but I think I would never say to anyone, just believe it for the sake of it. Like, if you don't get it in your head and you don't feel it in your heart, don't follow it. Like, I'm a rationalist. I'm very black and white. Like, I'm very German. Yeah, I don't follow things because it wants to make me feel better. I was like, oh, I need a crutch to make my life feel. No, I don't need that. I'm fine. I would only follow something that makes sense and is consistent. And this is the conclusion I've come to, alongside millions of others, of course, and not just by myself, but it's based on reality. And so
that's really interesting, because a lot of like the, you know, criticisms or observations of this time with like woke culture is that it's quite feeling led.
Yeah.
But what you're seeing is that people are coming searching for truth and reality.
Yeah.
And they're finding that in faith.
Yeah. Yeah, woke culture is interesting, isn't it? It's like, if you look back over the last, like, even a couple of years, right? It's like, it feels like it's evolving, ever evolving, and there's new sort of ways of thinking and rules and like obligations and ways of thinking and doing, and it just, you just never know where it's going to go. It just goes into all sorts of random concepts, and you sit there and you're like, have we got that far? Like, we're literally at this point now. And it does blow my mind. I'm like, wow, this is, where have we landed? And then you look back and it's like, why are we doing this? Or why are we saying this? So, you know, I see that a lot. And I think that's why now people are like coming to their senses a bit. I'm like, do we really want to go into this direction? Or is it more based on, reality and other values instead of just, you know, an ideology that everyone just makes up as they go along? It's like a bit like, do your own truth, and we end up all these random concepts you follow, and you're like, well, it's a bit lost, you know, it's a bit empty. So I think I've definitely seen the woke side of things. Yeah. Because working in fashion entertainment, obviously, is some stuff I'm like, wow. But I think it's just, end of the day, it's just quite empty. And I always say, look, whatever you do, if it fulfills you, if it makes you a better person, if it builds you, If you gain value from it, great, go for it. But if it doesn't, then why are you doing it? Yeah.
And so do you think that there's actually a resurgence of traditional values too? Does that go hand in hand with Christianity?
Good question. Yeah, because, like, talk about traditional values or ways of living or following a certain code, people don't like to be taught, like, used to always hate the whole having to follow anything, authority, like, this sounds like limiting, right? But if you look at any society that's thrived and has done very well, they had a certain way of conduct, they had a certain way of thinking, way of sort of teaching and living, and if it's through science or maths or history or geography, there was a consistent code of ethics and values. And I think, and even roles. I mean, for example, I studied psychology and sociology, and I looked at family structures after World War II. Now, we can debate as much as we want. When people saying, women should do whatever, men should do whatever they want. Of course, that's great. But the fact is that after the war, every woman was in the kitchen looking after families. There was no women going for work. During the war, there was, of course, because they had to. But after, and men had to go to work. They weren't sitting at home on benefits. There was no benefits. So they were forced to do what they had to do. Now, nowadays, you'd say it's very traditional, which it is, but it gave structure. And I'm not saying women stay at home and look up. Men can stay at home as well. But whatever it is, it needs structure. And I think consistency and knowing your identity. Now, back in the days, you remember when your dad was a mechanic, you'll become a mechanic as well. Your kids, and so on and so forth. It was you knew what you're going to do. There was purpose. You were taught. You don't have to think about it. Nowadays, you'd be like, Sarah, do whatever you want, be whatever you want, say whatever you want. You're like, that's so overwhelming. Like, what am I going to do? And this is what I see over and over with youth. They're so anxious about what they graduate. I literally have these conversations like weekly, freaking out about life and the pressure. You have to perform, you have to be something, you have to make it. And then well, about what? And I think that's also shifted the way of thinking of people and also brought them back to some sort of structure and values and some sort of, and I like that. Like, even in a business, you have to run a business a certain way. If everyone just did whatever the heck they want, then good luck.
Yeah, well, you don't have a board and you don't have a business.
You don't have a business, richly. Like, if everyone pays whoever, how much ever, whenever, So I think there's so much power and order, but again, not because you have to, but because you love to. And I think when you follow something because you love to and see the value in it, it's a very big difference compared to following something because you feel you have to. Yeah. And I think that is, even my company culture, I encourage, like, my staff, for example, when we do events, take it practical. If I'm not leading with example to clean the floor, I don't do it because I necessarily have to. I could not, but I want to encourage them because that just creates what is a good service, and everyone sees that. So they start following my example, and it's like, oh, that's actually really good. And I think that's what I want to encourage, like an action-based culture that's based on reality, not on some woke thinking that just expands into nothingness and doesn't give any satisfaction whatsoever, but actually gets people back to what actually practically works and what is wholesome and what is joyful and what brings fulfillment. I think that's what people are seeking now. Yeah.
So you think people are out of touch with reality in general?
I absolutely think so.
And very ideological.
Yeah.
What would you say is one of the biggest ideologies or lack of realities that really pisses you off?
Oh, good question. Well, probably, there's a few different things I'd say, but I'd say, the whole do whatever you want, whenever you want. It's just like, it sounds great technically, and you think about it briefly, but when you look at it more depth, it's just like, there's no depth to it. There's no meaning to it. It basically just causes chaos. And that's what I've seen happen. You just look at the next generation, and they'll tell you probably should interview someone slightly younger than me, but it's I just watch it all the time. A lot of my friends have kids, and that whole ideology, I think, it's caused a lot of damage actually. That whole do whatever you want, be whatever you want. It sounds like freedom, but really is not. Even identify however you want and think whatever you want, dress however you want. It's all sounds great, but actually you're just causing so much of choices that the person who's young and vulnerable doesn't know what to go for. And I think that's also quite damaging actually. So
yeah, and whatever you want, there are so many influences now that actually is just crazy for a young mind to think about who they want to be if the people that are bringing them up are not rooting them in some level of principle, right? Probably more even crazier than our generation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the one beautiful thing about this generation is we've kind of, I think, you know, when you look back in the 50s and 60s, like parenting styles and whatnot, you know, I think often were in many ways, there was a very good intention behind it, but often potentially there was a lot of damage caused as well, you know, and I think we can talk across our friends and things. And I think that's fair. But now we've added that element, we've tried everything, and now we've gone from one extreme to the next, and we're like, okay, that's also bad, because like depression rates, like I studied psychology after the war, and it was very structured. Depression rates, suicide rates, violent rates amongst women were very low, and it's gone ever so up over the years, even up into now, because women are just taken away from what they should be doing, who they should be, and bespeak everything and anything, and it's actually causing confusion more than anything, and it's actually causing damage, and they're like, it's like, this is crazy. And I think that's why the whole element of structure and giving some guidance and support, that's my heart for the next generation. If it's structure in faith, structure in work, structure in, you know, being able to support them financially or through networks, or I definitely want to give back more to the next generation, because they're beautiful. They're beautiful people. Her guys and girls, incredibly intelligent, so full of life, but often it's just taken away from them, you know, through just, again, as we just discussed, through just not knowing what they are, who they are, when they're going to be what. And I
think what's interesting in what you said when we were touching on like the traditional roles and also like women's identity too, like, again, statistics show families are not growing in Western culture. So we're in a decline, the amount of people that are having children. And a lot of that is choices that are economic or pressures from like, is there going to be another COVID? Is there going to be another war? Like, what are we doing? But also maybe a lot of women are out working and making those choices, and the rise of like women's empowerment and this financial independence. Are we now in a decline of the family and what that means?
You see it in Japan, disaster. See, I mean, you see it in China for a while. It was a one kid policy. You know, again, as I said, it all sounds quite good. But then if you take anything to an extreme, I think it always has an element of severe danger that it actually damages. And I think that's why I think finding a middle ground, which is healthy, it actually focuses on not on the following the principle, but actually following something that's holistic. I think of reality, as we said, right? That element of, are we following reality? Like, are we following who we really are and how our genetic makeup and our way of thinking? Are we actually following that? Or are we following some ideology that we want to push because we feel like we need to have a point, you know, like feminism, for example. Like, look at that. I mean, you probably have an opinion on that. I think it's incredible what they've achieved, you know, women's rights and voting rights, incredible. But then you would take it to a whole nother extreme where you're pushing women out of even the opportunity to actually, you know, try things for themselves in ways that are not very feministic is seen as an offense. I mean, the whole being a gentleman, I mean, that's a whole, you know, to a point where I'm like, so can't I be a gentleman anymore? Like, I've had women actually have a go at me for opening a door, and like, how dare you open the door? I'm like, oh, so sorry. You know, so it's like, that's extreme. Like, what are you doing? You know, so
and I always think, what's the broader intention of what we're trying to achieve? So the world's become so individualistic that we all have our own opinions and ways of operating. But then also we're destroying these things that are more cultural norms through that too. Do you think the world has become more individualistic in Western society?
I do think so. Yeah. I mean, look at loneliness, look at suicide, look at depression. I mean, we thrive in communities, right? That's what I think one of the reasons you see churches thriving as well, because they have incredible communities. They come together, they support each other, you know, everyone thinks for others rather than just for yourself. And I think that's what within or without a church system people need and are looking for. I mean, look at COVID, look at the damage. I mean, it's like everyone was out for themselves. Everyone was super scared, didn't want to talk to anyone, touch anyone, see anyone. I didn't go for it. I went for it one day and I said, no, I have no time for this. If I die tomorrow, happy days, fine. But I was like, it's like the anxiety it caused. I had my lawyer, for example, one of my lawyers, didn't leave his house for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. Are you crazy? He was literally on antidepressants for like 2.5 years. Like, was that worth it? And then it clearly wasn't. He killed himself. Like, it was literally that point where I'm like, you're not following what's holistic. You're just following a principle and something you've heard, and without actually living in reality of what's actually doing to you. So, yeah, I think we've definitely become more individualistic, I think. But I think there's a resurgence of this whole thinking for others, being for, and I want to lead on that, trust me.
Yeah.
I want to be generous. I want to be kind. I want to think for others. That's just, I will preach that to the rest of my life. Like, I think that's what people need to see, you know, being about others, not just about your own self. You know, it's easy to be selfish.
I agree. And I think there's always a verse in the Bible that comes back to me. And as an entrepreneur, I want to know your perspective on this. Money is the root of all evil. But as an entrepreneur, isn't this what we're supposed to be focused on?
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Good question. That's where we take things out of context can be very dangerous. Money's spoken in the Bible about over 2,000 times. Like it's one of the most spoken topics mentioned in the Bible, by the way. And the funny thing is that it talks about, every time it's mentioned, it's talk about how to handle money. And I think it's not about not having money or not making money or not growing. You just need resources. But if it becomes a thing you obsess about, you can call it your idol, your God, whatever, but it becomes unhealthy. And as with anything, right? If you're obsessing about anything, if you're obsessing about your partner and all you think about is your partner, I mean, obviously, but again, balance, right? Or just about everything you do is about your business, or obsessing about your health, or obsessing about your success, or obsessing about your image, obsessing about your age, whatever. Again, you're missing the balance. You're taking what was actually meant to be good and are using it for bad, consciously or subconsciously, either way. But money is the same thing. Money is always only going to be a resource. If you treat it as a thing you worship and thing you follow day and night, I mean, I work for so many wealthy people, and one of the things I know the difference is someone who's wealthy and uses it as a resource, guess what? They're happy. But those who use it as a thing they live for, miserable. You know, it's funny. Money will never make you happy, which is a good thing, and I know that. So I know. And so use it wisely. Use it as a resource for the greater good of others. I think that's why also I've had this conversation, slightly off topic, but a lot of successful creatives, dancers, musicians, and we both know. And I think the struggle I see is when they hit like 30s and 40s, they suddenly have this sort of, and I've had this conversation like not 1,000 times, but probably 50 times, where they suddenly start feeling empty. And they're like, I've succeeded, I've been in this show, I've traveled the world, I've done this and that, but I kind of feel empty. And I've literally had this conversation over, and I wonder why. And I truly think the reason is because it's always been about them. Like the same as modeling, fashion. Like I've done some crazy big campaigns, made some crazy money for it, but it's always empty. And I think that's what you have to realize is if you live life about yourself, you're never going to be fulfilled. You always want more. And I think that's why, same with money. If you use it to satisfy yourself, miserable. But if you use it to bless others, powerful. And I think with anything, right?
So it's about the way that it's used, not the actual tool itself.
Exactly.
Right.
How do you use the tool?
Right.
Like alcohol, having a glass of wine, fantastic. Having 10 glasses of wine, you might end up in hospital, So it's like, I think it's living life to the full in every element, but with a healthy sense of common sense, reality, and, within what you've created, being created by and for. Like if you fill a car with petrol, it's going to go far. Fill a car with earth or with, glue, it's not going to go anywhere. And so it's not abusing what's been created. And I think if you thrive on that and understand yourself, understand the elements of tools we have available, you're going to do so well in life. And I think that's often forgotten, especially in this woke culture where it's going to be like, oh, I want to follow an ideology and I need to be like that. And you end up being like just weird, or damaged or whatever. And I think, coming back to reality, I think is a big part of my sort of drive and mission to empower others to live in reality.
Incredible.
So,
right. Anything else you want to share with our guests about your perspective on life? Maybe a nugget, maybe something you've learned through your journey of faith or entrepreneurship or being with people.
I think there's various things I could probably say, but I'd say if you build your life on making yourself, if you build your life on self, you'll always be disappointed. But if you build your life on others, you can never be disappointed. I generally think that. If it's with friends, with family, with business. I had a crazy encounter when I was 23, and that's a story for another time. But up until that point, I was purely building a life for myself. I was miserable. It was quite a lonely journey. When I had that shift and be like, actually, I need to build a life for others. Like if you believe I have a faith or not, but just as a principle, I've experienced that. So I encourage everyone to build life around others. We need each other. We need to support each other more than ever now, right? The world's a crazy place. We know it. Why don't we start helping each other a little bit more and see the fruit from it?
Incredible. Thank you so much, Karlo.